You know, man.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Oh my goodness, we have incredible guests to chat with today about brain conversations. Yes, it's Saturday, and I know you're going to want to learn more. We had Alzheimer's, we had yoga, and now we have the incredible guests that I'm about to introduce to you. But first, I want to thank our sponsors today. You've seen them throughout ChiroThon. Today's sponsor is NCMIC. NCMIC was founded in 1946 by chiropractors who weren't satisfied with their insurance options. Well, they never strayed far from that spirit, always striving to do the right thing for our communities, customers, and employees at every opportunity, even when it means paving the way. Whether it's malpractice insurance, business insurance, credit card processing, equipment loans, or financial and insurance products, they provide customers with the thoughtful solutions they need to grow their business. If they want to learn more, that's you, chiropractor, listening today. You can go to ncmic.com to learn so much more. And now I want to introduce one of our most fabulous guests. It is Dr. Heidi Haavik, because everyone always pronounces her name wrong, so I love being able to say it properly. She's the Vice President of Research and the Dean of Research at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic. Yes, I said she's not from America, so give her a little bit of leeway because you might hear a little bit of that accent coming out. She is a chiropractor and a PhD in human neurophysiology from the University of Auckland. She's also an author of the book, The Reality Check, and we love that book. She also runs a company on the mission, which is why she's here today, on enlightening the world, and I truly mean the world, on the science of chiropractic, because she speaks around the world. And when you hear what she has to say, I guarantee you, it's going to blow you away. So welcome to ChiroThon 2024, Dr. Heidi.
Thank you, Sherry. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I do hope you understand my odd accent.
You never get to really home in on her because she's so busy, but when I do get a chance, it's like we're soul sisters.
I know.
I get how busy you are. And
so are you.
When I catch that moment, it's like, oh, get her on the couch. Let's talk to her. So we're really privileged today to have Dr. Heidi with us. We're going to start this conversation off, which is about the brain. And what are the brain changes in what happens? So we have conversations after chiropractic adjustments. How does the brain actually change these conversations?
Can I jump in before answering that question?
Yes.
Just about NCMIC, because
Please.
they also support research. And they've actually supported several of my studies. So I am just so delighted that they are the sponsor of,
Isn't that beautiful?
this section.
See?
So I just
Not
wanna
even
say,
planned, NCMIC.
honestly, they're amazing. It's their foundation, and if you are an NCMIC member and you get those checks back, if you donate that into the foundation, they support research like the kind of stuff that we've done. And what I have been doing for the past 24 years, which is a bit embarrassing really, just shows you how old I am, is we've discovered that when you're adjusting subluxations in the spine, these dysfunctional segments in the spine, you're changing the way, or you're changing how accurately your brain can perceive what's going on inside your body and the world around you. So that your brain, which is controlling everything, is better able to adapt to what's going on for you at the time and better able to control your whole system. And it's quite a journey. I mean, unbelievable.
It really actually contemplates everything that you thought you knew.
I know.
When you start thinking about how does your brain change, because a lot of us think, the brain is the brain and everything else is really the part that's mobile, because the brain doesn't technically move around like our arms and legs and everything else. And I think what happens as we have these conversations and we recognize that a chiropractic adjustment does that and so much more. And that was one of the pieces that I wanted to talk to you about, the brain conversation, because the brain really does. If you don't know this, and I know you do, your brain has a conversation with you all day long. Now for us, it's totally different. We can talk to ourselves. It's scary when we answer ourselves, but it's okay.
Yeah. I do that too.
That's right, it's okay. See, fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. What we do is we're changing reflex, positive changes for the person. So I want you to talk about when this happens, what are some of the positive changes that when a person gets a chiropractic adjustment, how does that impact their daily life? Let's kind of go deeper.
That's a good one. So we've done a whole series of research experiments looking at this, and for example, we know things like early on we found that adjusting the spine helps the brain better control the movement of the spine. Well, that makes sense, right? Yeah. But then we started to discover that adjusting the spine also helps the brain know more accurately where your elbow joint is, where your ankle joint is, and we're like, to begin with, going, oh my goodness. And it sends different messages to the muscle, so it's like changing the way it's moving, the arms and legs. And it kind of makes sense now, because if you think about, your arms and legs, they actually attach to the spine, either directly or indirectly. So it's like the brain, when it's wanting to move or pick up on where your arms and legs are and then control your arms and legs, well, it needs to send the movement messages according to where it knows you are. But if it doesn't know where you are, because you've got dysfunction in the spine, which really means that the little muscles that cross the individual bones, the individual vertebra in the spine, they stop talking to the brain, and then the brain doesn't know what's going on there. But that spinal, not knowing what's going on in the spine, influences how it sends messages to its muscles and its arms and legs. But what really blew me away is when we also started doing some studies looking at things like how the brain interprets sound and visual information. Like, you're going, whoa, and it does. We know that spinal dysfunction, you're less accurately able to, you can detect. It's not like we're changing the information, the sound information coming into the ears or the vision hitting the retina and going to the brain, but it's how the brain interprets that sound and visual information, because you can't detect where a sound is coming from unless you know where you are.
Point.
And our spine represents the core of our body. So just like the spine is important for your brain to give messages to arms and legs because they attach to the spine, you also need to be able to know where you are to properly or accurately interpret sound and visual information. So the contemporary understanding now of the subluxation, which is just the name that we chiropractors give for this dysfunction in the spine, the contemporary understanding is it's a part of the spine that stopped communicating with the brain, so the brain doesn't control the movement pattern of that part of the spine appropriately because it doesn't know what's going on, so it can't. But that influences so much more. And we're now, fast forward 25 years, now we're finding that the way the brain is having conversations with itself changes. And these changes in brain conversations, we know exactly where to in the brain, but I won't bore you with too many big brain science names. You probably, don't want to know. But these conversations are influencing things like anxiety and depression. They're influencing fatigue levels. And it's like we're actually changing the way the brain is having a conversation about who we are as human beings and how we pick up on other human beings and how we respond to them. So we're activating some of these limbic brain areas in how we understand our own emotions, how they relate to our body sensations, and how we relate to others. It is like I'm getting goosebumps at some of these more recent studies. It is so exciting.
As she gets excited, she excites me more. So now you can see what's happening here. But we're going to back up because I want to share a very funny story with you. My husband listened to Dr. Heidi Haavik on Adjusted Reality. And he called me because I was traveling at the time, and he goes, first off, you got to tell Heidi she rocks. And I said, I'll do that. It only took me a couple years to do that. So this is your warning. My husband thinks you rock. Second, he said, I now know, according to Heidi's research, that when I stub my toe, I should be asking you for an adjustment.
Yes. Yes. See? And that's the kind of thing, Sherry, and I thank you for bringing that up, because sometimes I get so caught up in the neuroscience language that I just forget the everyday things for normal people. Like, your brain is supposed to be super accurately aware of where your entire body is. If you're just going for a walk and you pull a muscle for no reason whatsoever, that shouldn't happen. That means that you've got a disconnect, you've got subluxations. You shouldn't stub your toe. You shouldn't knock your elbow on door frames. You shouldn't hit your head getting into a car. That means that your proprioception is out. That brain awareness of where your head, body, arms and legs are in space. And you need to accurately know where everything is to be able to control your movement patterns. So if you don't know what's going on, you can then pull a muscle because you're telling the muscle to contract in a way that actually strains it or sprains it. That's where some of those things come into it. So, and also it could be that you don't cope well in, say, for example, really loud, noisy environments with lots of sounds, lots of visual inputs. And that could be, again, because you're subluxated, because your brain isn't able to accurately integrate all this sound and visual information.
That's really interesting because you think about it in the good old days when we were younger, and you had a phone and you heard it busy sound. It was like you knew right away.
Yeah.
You're not connecting. You can't communicate because it's busy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
That's what it is.
It's busy. Now, if you're a little bit younger, think about your smartphone, okay?
Yeah.
When you use your smartphone and use a bunch of apps, what happens is your smartphone starts to slow down. It no longer has the same ability
Capacity.
to use the energy that it's given. So your battery starts to be drained.
Yeah.
So I want to reflect, because we've got we have the young youth thinking about chiropractic. Yes, you are thinking about becoming a chiropractor.
Yes.
To our aging adults.
Or a scientist.
That's right, our neuroscientists that are thinking really about, what do I do with my life, or how do I continue to have this beautiful life that I was given and I don't have chronic pain?
Can I
Yes,
jump in
yes,
again here?
please.
Because I'm getting excited now. Because we also know that the subluxation when it first happens, it's very much just a neural problem. The brain just doesn't know, and so it's not controlling the system properly. What becomes a problem is your brain will adapt, and it always adapts every day. So if you've had that subluxation for like 2 years, that is a very different problem now.
Yes.
And all the brain adaptations that are now negatively adapting because your brain doesn't know what's going on right from that day one. We know, for example, that those little muscles around the spine, they actually shrink and atrophy and get replaced by fat, so that the muscles completely dysfunction. So we almost, and it's why seeing a chiropractor isn't a one-time thing, because what chiropractors are really doing is they're exercising those little muscles around the spine back into proper function, so your brain accurately can perceive what's going on inside you and the world around you, so that your adaptions that are taking place in your brain are actually happening in a positive, accurately aware
This is
place.
epic. So what you're saying is you're conditioning me for success.
Yeah.
Chiropractic is conditioning you for success. You have to answer the question, because every woman that hears fat immediately thinks, can you fix that? Can you fix the fat? Can you go back to conditioning? If it's been out like this for that long, Heidi.
I mean, what a question. Well, what we know, I'm going to sidestep that question ever so slightly, because it depends what kind of fat you're talking about. But what we know is when you apply that adjustment, it has such a profound impact on your central nervous system, on your brain and brain stem and spinal cord. It has such a profound effect that it's equivalent to a research study. We did similar studies to someone else who looked at 3 weeks of strength training. So isn't that remarkable?
Wow.
So one single adjustment session has the same impact. And I've joked, I don't need to go to the gym, but actually I do. But, you just need to go and see a chiropractor, but that's not true. Exercise is phenomenal for changing, the shrunken, fatty, infiltrated muscles. And I'm afraid it's the same for us as well. But if you want to improve that functioning of those little muscles close to the spine so that your brain accurately knows what's going on inside you and around you, then you need to see a chiropractor to exercise those little muscles back into proper function. That we've seen in studies. We're actually doing a study with the Hong Kong Chiropractic Association at the moment, where we're literally looking at those little muscles on MR images, and we can see, because you can see the cross-section area of the muscle and you can see all the fatty infiltration, and we're going to measure that over a period of time with chiropractic care. And we're going to start looking at what frequency of care is best, because if you're exercising muscles, I don't know about you, but one usually needs to do that multiple times.
How unfortunate.
I know.
You have to exercise more than once a month?
It's not fair. I would quite like the once a month.
Right? We can do that.
I know. Well, I do that. Anyway, I don't know. No, that's terrible. I do exercise more than that. But so we're looking at now, what about different frequencies of care, and what's having then the biggest impact on those little muscles, on the morphology and the amount of fat, because that fat shouldn't be there.
Right.
And this isn't done by chiropractic scientists. This is done by some really amazing spinal physiologists like, Paul Hodges and things like that. Some really amazing scientists that are out there doing that. But yeah.
When you talk about fat, because we think about the 4 chronic conditions of the world right now: hypertension, diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular issues. We're talking about the 4 chronic conditions that happen around the world. All linked with what?
High inflammation.
Talk to me more about that.
What's really fascinating is one of the main parts of the brain that we know we impact, and we've found this out since 2016, I think, is the first time, and it's been repeated several times, is this part of the brain right behind your forehead. And it's the part that, it's like it inhibits like our emotions. It's why we're not tantruming 2-year-olds. Well, maybe mine's a bit dysfunctioning, but anyway, it also directly activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your healing, anti-inflammatory, reproductive system, and it also suppresses or inhibits the sympathetic, the high pro-inflammatory system, which is needed in like small doses when you've had an injury or something, but we ended up with this chronic stress, so we're chronically inflamed. Also the neuroendocrine pathway, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal stress axis that pumps out cortisol, and a lot of us are in this chronic stress state, which is just pushing inflammation up, and that same stress that increases inflammation actually turns off the prefrontal cortex. And when we get adjusted, this is the part of the brain that we're sort of activating. And I mean, you should see it, Sherry. We've got this, it's called functional near-infrared spectrometry, but anyway, it literally shows the oxygenation. It's like a little panel that you just put across your forehead, and you can literally see the oxygenation of the blood. So it's like on a low when you're resting and you're not doing anything, it's just sitting there quite nice and low. And like within like 30 seconds, 10 seconds after an adjustment, the whole thing goes red, maximum activity across the whole forehead. So you light up that prefrontal cortex, and we've measured it over time, and these changes in the way that part of your brain is operating changes after the adjustment. It lasts after the adjustments as well. So it's like,
wow.
And we're only just scratching the surface. Like honestly.
Isn't it fun? I mean, that describes a lot, because we've all been through a lot during this immense last 4 or 5 years. It's just been incredibly stressful for all of us. So we've gone through this constant, chronic, inflammatory state, and now we're starting to recognize what we knew back in the day, 130 years ago. I'm catching her totally off guard because I love her this much that I know I can ask her something that's so out there, but 130 years ago, Dee Dee Palmer started thinking about what is the ability to heal, and how do we go from dis-ease to disease. And you and I, and we're very different, because I come from a cellular molecular microbiology. She's a neurophysiologist. So you're looking at the nerves and I'm looking at the cellular level. What are the mitochondria doing? But when you think back to Dee Dee Palmer, doesn't it give you chills? Because
he was so spot on.
He's so misunderstood, and yet now you and I are sitting on a couch going,
is he that misunderstood?
Whoa. Now
because he was spot on. Like it freaks me out. I did not set out to prove Dee Dee right.
No.
You know, I was literally just trying to understand why the spine was so important for our brain and for our health. But like things that he wrote back then with this science where it was at back then was utter genius.
It really is. It really is.
He might have got a few things wrong, but you know, so did Einstein. And, you know,
and we still love Einstein.
No, honestly, to me, Dee Dee Palmer, and BJ for that matter, they're utter heroes.
I agree 100%.
We wouldn't be here, right?
I think that we need to look back to our founders and start thinking about how they saw the world. Like when Dee Dee Palmer used the word innate, you can think of that as the genome, right? We can start thinking and looking at the way he looked at the world with the time frame that he was 130 years ago.
Those genes
kind of
discovered
like
them.
Elon Musk. Okay, he throws his satellites in the air. Things do actually communicate and discommunicate, right? I mean, when people need help, when they're having an emergency situation and they need to be able to be connected, right?
To their own selves.
Now we understand the connection. So talk to me more about the connection portion.
And I also think it's so important that we don't, we need to take the genius from the past, but we also don't need to be stuck there either.
Amen.
Because he was like 200 years ahead of his time. So now we also need to be thinking, like Elon Musk, 200 years ahead of time. How can we do this better, smarter? Like one of the things we're working on is a lot of wearable technology, and to be able to pick up on a lot of wearable technology from real chiropractic patients, from real chiropractors, because that kind of big data is like, it's going to change the world.
It really is.
And I think it's definitely going to change the view on chiropractic, because we've had so little funding for research that you've got like a little study here and a couple of studies there, and like it's just so, it's not enough. But if you can get millions of patients from thousands of chiropractors, and you can start looking at what's changing for them, I think honestly, you're going to have this reversal. It won't be like 15%, 20% seeing chiropractors. It will be like 80, 90%.
100%.
Because if you have a spine and you have a brain and you're alive, then go and get your spine checked. It doesn't mean that there's always something wrong, but like, we can't see our back. You can't move your spine from visual inputs. You have to rely on the communication from these little muscles.
That's right.
To.
And it doesn't depend. And that was
And
the
you don't even
beautiful
have to be
part.
in pain.
You
We
don't.
talked about that.
You were
Yeah.
talking about the
I know.
subclinical part. It's like,
I know.
when did you have aches and pains? Well,
Yeah.
I don't get it all the time, right?
And even on pain-free days, we've shown things like your brain is less accurately aware. If you have recurring ache, pain, or tension in your spine, I mean, most of us, I have discovered some people don't have that though, which is mind-boggling.
Really good.
But if you do happen to have recurring ache, pains, and tension, even on days that you are pain-free, no symptoms at all, your brain is less accurately aware of where your arms and legs are. It is not controlling your body appropriately. You are less accurately able to integrate sound and visual information at the same time. You aren't able to retain motor learning. So if you're trying to learn a skill, like a sport or a new job or music, that is a motor skill that you have to learn. Well, we showed again in studies that you could learn it, but you didn't retain it for 48 hours.
That's right.
If you had spinal dysfunction. And again, this reverses or changes or improves if you're adjusting the spine. Like, you can have aches and pains in arms and knees and elbows and ankles, and that can go away from checking and adjusting the spine only, not touching the arms. And this is what's coming out now in a lot of the chronic pain literature, is that sensory communication from, they call it the paraspinal tissues, which really just means like the little muscles around your spine. That sensory communication to the brain is most likely what's driving the brain's inability to control appropriately arms and legs. So it's sending the wrong messages, and you might end up with these little micro traumas that, like, you might be pulling a little bit on one side of your elbow more than the other than compared to what you should. Well, it's okay once or twice, but try that 1,000 times, and all of a sudden it's sore and it's aching but there's nothing wrong with your elbow. It's that your brain doesn't know where the spine is, so it can't control the movement messages going to arms and legs. So it's sort of changing how we viewed. I mean, chiropractors have kind of known this for a long time, but we're starting to find out with solid physiology, neuroscience research that can explain this.
And as you go through it, and I want my audience to recognize this, think about the place, and for many that have a smartphone, they know, is GPS coordinates, okay? Yeah. At some level, many will feel they're nowhere if they don't have their phone because they don't know their GPS location, okay? So you're nowhere, right? But come along with the brain and then recognize after a chiropractic adjustment, you went from nowhere to now
knowing
here.
Where you are.
You're really separating, and you know your coordinates. Yeah. You have communicated with all your functional family members, your elbow, your ankle, and how that impacts your longevity.
Oh,
and that's such an important thing, because so much more of what we're learning now, and it always reminds me of the Dwayne Dwyer quote, which is, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. I hope that was an awareness moment for you, because that conversation we started today is about the brain and how the brain communicates and has conversations.
And these later studies that we're doing right now, we're showing that we're changing those communications about who you are, how you fit into the world, and because what we're realizing now is that what the brain believes to be true, it's not what you believe, but it's what your brain believes to be true, is actually more important than the sensory information coming in.
Whoa.
I know, which I think is why the brain needs that reboot or the wake-up call with the adjustment.
Whoa.
Because it's breaking through your brain's story, which is we end up with these chronic problems even after the initial injury has healed. Or we develop, our fears turn into, anxiety, chronic crippling anxiety, or worries turn into full-blown depression. Well, they think now, the neuroscientists, is that it becomes embodied as part of the brain's story about itself. And we know we're changing that conversation that the brain is having about who I am, which is quite remarkable. So some of these really stubborn problems that it's really tricky to actually get rid of, it's making sense now why chiropractic care would actually be making that difference. So it's
wow.
Unbelievable.
I'm recognizing that you're probably sitting there because I'm as excited listening to her. I hope you're seeing that what she just said was breakthrough scientific research to come to tell you that these mindful problems become brain stories, and those brain stories impact the way your body senses, mechanically moves, and then how you place yourself in the world. So it could literally be confidence building. Like if we go that next step of how far can we stretch when we start thinking about how are we taking care of our body, our brain, and our ability to adapt to the world. Adaptability, flexibility.
Resilience, you know, how much can you cope with? Because that prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain, that bit behind your forehead, which enables you to be adaptive, enables you to inhibit information that you don't need to pay attention to, that's not important for what you're trying to achieve in life, being able to switch attention. So if you're having trouble with any of those things, or even emotional control, pain, all movements all day, every day, so the, you know, knocking elbows on door frames or hitting heads, all of this is controlled in that part, that super important part of the brain that we know it requires that information from the spine to the brain.
So when you're thinking about your next steps, because you said 200 years ahead, we need to be here, we need to move everybody with us. And you know, like she had said to me previously, is it takes 20 years to get the conversation in the medical community to change, okay? 20 years. So imagine what your brain story, it takes time. It reflects upon where we need to go. Where would you say, Dr. Heidi, that we're here now? What would you like to see build up in the future? What would you like to see in research to work with?
Oh, there's so much. I don't think we've got enough time to cover all. And like honestly, I recently wrote an £80 million research proposal.
Wow.
Just to give you an idea. So one thing is we need a lot more money for research because there's so much we still need to understand. But there's also so many conditions now. Now that we know we're impacting the brain, there's a lot of, like we've started doing studies in Alzheimer's, in Huntington's disease, in dementia, in like this, and even what about the neurodevelopmental disorders like ADHD and autism? And I'm not trying to say that we would cure any of those things, but we could impact them because we know we're changing the way the brain is adapting. So like it could add a lot of benefit. So like, for example, even like rehab programs, you know, even like stroke studies. We've done about 3 or 4 clinical trials now in chronic stroke victims showing that a period of chiropractic care adds this additional but clinically meaningful benefit in their ability for their brain to activate their muscles that are important for their activities of daily living.
Brilliant.
Like there is so much work that we need to do. There's some amazing research going on in veterans as well, and you think of all the stressors that they have been under, physical and emotional and probably chemical as well if you think about it, right? But even just normal people have been through so many traumas themselves, and all those traumas, we know that the prefrontal cortex is the most sensitive part of the brain to stress. It shuts off. So imagine that's being shut off, then you no longer have that, you know, the reasoning, thinking, intelligent part of your brain active, so you're almost just on autopilot, you know, like, and that's how you go through life. So like there's so many people that would benefit from chiropractic care, but we just haven't done the studies yet. There's a whole new area of immune system functioning. But even imagine babies and children. Have you seen, I mean, my own babies, and you see a lot of chiropractic babies that get adjusted, like they don't fall and hit their heads, and you watch their friends that aren't being adjusted, like they're whacking their head and they're falling on their back and they're, you know, breaking arms, and like my fingers itch because I am a chiropractor as well as a scientist. I just want to take care of these babies, you know, because, you know, that sets them up then. Well then, you know, if that's interfering with their ability to know where their arms and legs are, or their ability to, you know, focus their eyes. What about reading? What about sport? What about music? They think they're idiots. What if it's affecting? And they're getting stressed about it too, and then they think they're stupid, and they think they can't do things, and like that changes them for life.
A whole new story has been written. Because you're so right. Is your confidence level starts with as you're a baby, and as you grow, and as you see those adjustments being made. It's a beautiful thing.
Child.
Yeah. And And for those of you that are thinking, well, I've never thought to even take my child to a chiropractor, I think this is a moment to reflect on, we're changing the way you look at things because we're starting from the very beginning of life and we're moving through the course to where we get older and more aged. And muscle gets lost as we get older.
From in pregnancy until the day you die, I will be getting checked and adjusted. I pay for my own care too. I just think it's important because I pay for my husband, I pay for my staff members as well, and we go weekly. I can't bring it down from less than that. And I also think what's really, really important is to move into big data. Utilize technology and a lot of wearable technology and utilize electronic health records and start looking at millions of chiropractic patients because there are benefits out there that most people have no idea about. They think chiropractic is only about back pain, neck pain and headaches, and it does a great job. And don't get me wrong, I think it's really, really important, but I think it's so much more.
Heidi, it's so much more, which is why we're sitting with you right now on this couch, because we know how much your life can be impacted. We became chiropractors. I particularly was in cellular molecular microbial biology. I got into a car accident. I'm in the lab. I'm looking at little things, and now I'm at the big thing in life. Like sitting with you is so inspiring because I see you looking at the future like Dee Dee Palmer looked at it, which is how do we do better? How? It really is.
Because some of the changes with chiropractic care to take time. Like it appears to be from the research we've done is that a lot of these perceptual changes happen quite quickly. So you can notice a difference like within the first visit or 2 or 3. But some other changes in the nervous system, more complex neural changes, they actually take time because it's a brain adaptation that slowly changes over time, and it does take time and repetition.
It's a really interesting concept because you think about how autoimmune, like from my perspective, like I'm watching these little people in the hospital, in the children's hospital, and I'm watching the time and the energy that's going into them from a cellular, molecular, microbial perspective and what's happening with them. And yet they're not getting the hands-on touch. Just touch alone is so important, and we're seeing that over and over again. But then can you imagine if you were to have a reflection that on top of where they are right now, they could have these chiropractic adjustments, and what would that look like in their life?
I know. Knowing that we change the brain, for example, well, the brain and the gut are intimately linked. So if you change brain, we're probably changing gut.
Yes.
So I've, again, recently met up with some, microbiology experts. We also know that a lot of chiropractic patients feel like they sleep better. So again, I've found a sleep expert.
I love it.
I haven't got the time to become an expert in everything myself, right? I mean, this is not happening. But so, you team up with other experts, and then I, talk them into, and it doesn't take too much, talk them into doing a chiropractic study. I just need to raise the bloody money.
I hear you. That's why we're here today. We need to come back to where we were to take you where we want to go, which is ChiroThon. ChiroThon. We need you to help us, support us, so we can support this incredible research, so you can have greater longevity, so your family can have a better way of looking at things, so it becomes drug-free, it becomes cost-effective. And the best part is I was talking to some Optum Health research that came out that talked about when you start with a chiropractor, you end with a chiropractor. When you have an episode of back pain, for example, you start with a chiropractor, and there's no fragmentation of care, and that's a really important thing because they looked at fragmentation of care. They started with a general practitioner, they started with a nurse practitioner, they ended up seeing 3, 4, maybe sometimes 5 different physicians to get the care they needed.
You end up with more opioids. So again, seeing the chiropractor first, you end up with less opioid prescriptions, or at least filling less prescriptions. There's less escalation of care because a lot of these chronic back pain problems now, we know that there's a lot of maladaptive plasticity happening in the brain, and we know that a lot of these surgeries and a lot of the drugs, they might take the pain away initially, but they have no long-term benefit. And actually, there's actually quite a lot of studies now showing that it can do quite a bit of harm. But if you see a chiropractor first, these things they just don't happen as much. So some people need the surgery, totally cool, but try a chiropractor first, and you will find that more times than not, you won't have that escalation of care. And this 100%. Is coming through in the research as well. Not my research, but just the
I get so excited because we get that research as we start to bring it to fruition, and we're starting to then recognize one of the pieces that I think might shock you, or maybe not, maybe you've already, but when you think about care, in which he talked about just pain, acute pain. You fell down, you hurt your knee really bad, and it's throbbing, and you want to do what the MD says, which is just take some ibuprofen and just take some Tylenol. talk to our listeners right now, because I want you to recognize everything you put in your mouth has a purpose. And it could be refined sugar. It has a purpose. It causes inflammation. Okay, we all love our chocolate. We're not gonna lie. But it has a residual output.
Yeah.
And I want you to share with them a little bit about that, because I know you understand everything has a purpose.
Yeah.
The reality becomes, how much does that impact my lifestyle?
Yeah, and like there are so many things that we know now. We know beyond a doubt, for example, that exercise is probably the wonder drug of the century. So it's one of those things that if you want longevity, if you want to live a healthy life, you should be exercising. But please keep in mind that your spine needs to be exercised as well. And I actually think that the spinal adjustments is the foundational thing, because then your brain accurately knows how to send the correct messages to your muscles, the bigger muscles, when you're actually exercising, because you could be telling muscles to move, but they're pulling wrong, right?
Yes.
If you're not, so get checked and adjust. That's the foundation. We also know that eating healthy makes such a difference, like cutting out reducing the sugar. I'm with you. I mean, chocolate is just to die for, but eating healthy, huge benefits. Looking after your gut and your microbiome. The last 20 years in neuroscience research, oh my goodness. 20 years ago, the microbiome was like, that's gastroenterology. It's got nothing to do with neuroscience. Yeah. Now, when you go to the big neuroscience conferences in America that I try to go to every year, the big Society for Neuroscience conferences, I could spend my whole 5 days running from section to section, just listening to different microbiome talks, because the gut is so important for your brain. So if you have gut issues whatsoever, you need that worked on as well. We know sleep matters so much. If you get the deep sleep, it's like a dishwasher for your brain.
Oh, nicely
and you
put.
need to clean out those toxins from your brain. If they build up, we know what happens. Again, we know the neurodegenerative disorders.
We don't want sticky rice in our brain from the night before.
So, we know that health, there's many pillars of health, but I actually believe that the foundation that will help all of those other pillars is that chiropractic care. Again, I haven't done the studies yet, but we're going to start looking at the microbiome now, and I wouldn't be surprised, knowing what a powerful effect we have on the brain, that we will be impacting the microbiome without even taking any kind of supplements for the microbiome. Really interested. Watch this space. This is what's coming out of it. Again, with sleep, breathing, we have some research going at the moment with a breathing expert. Our breathing rhythms impact so much from your stress levels. It can actually calm your brain down and things like that as well. But the breathing is also the rhythm that carries all of the brain waves on it. So your breath is far more important than just oxygenating your brain and your body. It actually carries all of your brain waves that are responsible for your ability to think. A lot of us sitting slouched over, you try, if you're sitting slouched over yourself, right, try taking a big deep breath.
It's not working, is it?
Not working. Okay, sitting up straight, shoulders back, and again, take a big deep breath. So, and then think
almost
about,
as good as chocolate, right?
Well, not really, but think of the diaphragm breathing muscle. It attaches to the spine. Think of all the ribs. They're attached to the spine. All of these accessory breathing muscles up in our neck, they attach to the spine. If your spine's not working, your breathing isn't going to be as good. And that's going to impact not only your oxygenation of your whole body. We could go on and on, Sherry. You know that.
So
I
exciting.
could talk to you for forever. But I'm sure we're wrapping up soon, aren't we?
We are, and I want to remind you that we have to do this with you. We can't do it without you, and that's why Heidi and I are so pumped up and asking you to join us. f4cp.org/ChiroThon. This is how we change the world, and we change it together. Listen, you're going to hear in the next coming moments an Olympic javelin. You're going to hear a Masters PGA. You're going to hear a PGA Tour. You're going to hear the guy that hits the ball, the golf ball the longest in Guinness Book of World Records. You're going to hear an MLB World Series outfielder. I'm going to tell you, this is a lineup you do not want to miss. But I'm telling you, she's the foundation to everything they do. Before we go, I have one last question. You did a Taekwondo study.
We did.
And it's so epic because I just need you to hear this one little teeny piece before we let you go. Tell them what you found.
Olympic level elite Taekwondo athletes. One of our Board of Trustees members at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic just happened to know them, as you do, right? And so we brought them in and did a study on them and showed, again, because they don't really have any bias, didn't really know, didn't really care, but one session of chiropractic increased their strength, the maximum voluntary strength that they could produce in a leg muscle by 6%. Wow. And when you're at an Olympic level, 6% is the difference between first and last, right?
First and last.
But we've done this in normal college students as well and showed a 16% increase in
Wow.
strength. And we've done it in stroke survivors that have lost their brain's ability to activate muscles. And they had on average 65% increase in their affected limb.
If that didn't just blow your mind, because it blew my mind, f4cp.org/ChiroThon. Can you imagine the people we can help when we start studying and we start relating to the bottom line is your brain tells your body, and that brain
Everything.
story and that conversation is critical. I can't thank you enough. You're an angel of everybody's new and found future, the longevity that you should have, the ability for you to connect with the people around you. I mean, this is like 200 years in the future, but we're having the conversation right now because of someone like Kara. And I want you to remind yourself that when you think about your career, if you're at that age where you're like, what would be a fun career?
I know.
Can you see the love we have, the chiropractic passion? Don't worry, because we have two fabulous guests that are going to be talking about that, but think about it.
You're helping people live to their optimal potential. I mean, what could be more fun? And you can work with anything from babies through to, older adults.
You could be a researcher.
Or you can be a researcher. Or you could teach. You can travel. It's a world-recognized career. It is unbelievable.
I have to say this as we end, because we really are blessed. I and Heidi can probably agree with this. We go around the world talking to other people that are not chiropractors.
Yep.
I will tell you without a doubt, with 100% of sincerity, everything in my body, that the family of chiropractic is the strongest knitted community I've ever been around in my life. I literally leave here, and it's it's such a blast to be with, because we touch all day long.
And there's so much energy. It's like there's like this vitality.
It's not that we're weird, because everyone's like this.
You'll see all the people that you interview will probably be bouncing around. Like I'm struggling to sit still, but then I am a bit weird too.
This is why we do what we do. We want to thank you so much for sharing your Saturday. For her to fly all the way over the pond from New Zealand, the New Zealand Chiropractic College.
The best college on the planet is the New Zealand College of Chiropractic. So
She
come
got it
study
in.
there.
You can go anywhere you want, but listen, if you want to have this kind of energy, well, I'm telling you, becoming a chiropractor, when you see what's up next, is going to be fun. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Heidi. You are an absolute bonfire of goodness, and we look forward to having you join us in the next segment, when you can learn more about what it takes and what it means to become a chiropractor. I want to thank NCMIC for sponsoring this segment, and we'll go right to
rocks.
them. That's right, they do.
I cannot imagine the profession being where it is today without NCMIC existing. They have been a backbone and a rock to our profession.
They have incredible resources and opportunities available for students and DCs alike.
When chiropractors find themselves in trouble, NCMIC is there right behind them to support them and be the best they can be.